Good evening, everyone. Nice to see the names coming on the screen. If you have a chance, please put in the chat your name and where you are in the country. It's always fun to see. I'm Lucy Beard. I'm a recent past member of the National Collaborative for Women's History Sites Board of Directors. I am now a member of the program and the finance committees. I've served on that board for 9 years, so it's time for a break. But I was very excited to organize this program for tonight. And this is what we call our annual meeting, where we've just closed out our 22nd, sorry, as an organization. We're extremely busy these days. We've still adding sites to the National Votes for Women Trail. We are, and now to further enhance the trail, we've created a series of podcasts. And the podcast series is called Her March to Democracy, and it focuses in-depth interviews with the coordinators of the National Votes for Women Trail in 10 different states. There will be more states coming, but I encourage you to look for that podcast if you're interested. Wherever you get your podcasts, as they say. It's called Her March to Democracy. Right now, it's up for an award as the best podcast on women's history. So vote for us. Vote early, vote often. Another project we are involved with, we're working very closely with the National Park Service on the restoration of the Clara Barton National Historic Site, the first women's history site in the National Park Service. The building is up for major renovations, and they will be reinterpreting and rejuvenating Clara Barton's story. She's an amazing woman who's got a lot of relevance with many of our issues today. So we're very busy with that as well. Please check out all these and more information on our website, which is in the chat right now. There are links to all of this in the chat. But let's get on to tonight's program. I'm very happy to have joining me tonight Evelyn Hershey, the Education Director of the American Labor Museum, Botto House, a National Historic Landmark in Haldane, New Jersey. Paterson, New Jersey, we'll say. Okay. And as well, Paul Cole, the Executive Director of the American Labor Studies Center and affiliated with the Kate Mullaney National Historic Site. The Botto House National Landmark, it's a 1908 home of immigrant silk mill workers. And in the winter of 1913, more than 24,000 men, women, and children marched out of Paterson's silk mills, calling for decent working conditions. So Evelyn will share that and more about the story of the site and what has happened there with us. Paul Cole from Troy, New York. The Kate Mullaney House was declared a National Historic Landmark in 1998 and designated an affiliated unit in the National Historic Site in 2005 as a National Historic Site of the Park Service. It's located in Troy, New York, and it's home of the American Labor Studies Center. The mission of the American Labor Studies Center, is to promote the teaching and learning about the American labor movement and its history in K-12 schools nationwide. Kate Mullaney was the founder and leader of the nation's first all-women's union. So thank you very much for joining us. We thought we'd go in chronological order and have Paul speak first. So we're doing it old style, and I'm going to share my screen and a series of slides for Paul to work off of. Can everyone see that?
Mm-hmm.
Great. Okay. So take it away, Paul, and thanks for joining us tonight.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you and congratulations for all the wonderful work of the center. My background is a high school social studies teacher for 23 years in Lewiston, New York, just out of Niagara Falls. At some point, we developed a 10-week unit on American Labor Studies Center, American Labor Studies. And I then went on to become the political director and then ultimately the secretary treasurer of the New York State AFL-CIO. And I served a short while on the NEA board of directors, but probably 20 years or so as an AFT vice president. Basically, I found once I got involved in the labor movement that the schools weren't doing much about labor history, maybe a little bit during the Depression or something. And so I saw a need there to develop some curriculum and teaching materials for teachers how to integrate labor into the curriculum. And it's K-12. It's mostly 11th grade social studies, at least in New York. But there are other things like people can teach, music teachers can teach protest music and do labor songs, or artists, and you can really get creative here. The one thing we did, most of this was done in an office in my house, and then we were looking for a home. And then some years ago, maybe 20 now, I'm getting old at this, we discovered there was the home of a young Irish immigrant, we said, by the name of Kate Mullaney, who formed and led the first bona fide all-female union in the country. There were other efforts by women to organize and strike and so on, but this became institutionalized. And she actually was from Troy, and we found out that where her house was. And it is actually, as we'll see, I think as we go through, a 3-story, 6-apartment building that she was able to purchase. And we had that restored. So we only were able to buy the right-hand side of the building, which was fine. And so there's the building there. So on the first floor, on the right-hand side, is the exhibitry on broadly the labor movement, then more specifically on women in the labor movement, and then very narrowly on a lot of stuff on Kate Mullaney throughout the 3 floors there. I think we'll see later. The second floor, the offices of the American Labor Studies Center. And the top floor, we hired a historic architect to tell us when Kate Mullaney lived here, what did it look like? And so he developed the plans for the restoration of the Mullaney House to look like it did probably in the late 1860s, 1870s. And you're seeing some of those shots there. These are all pictures from the second floor. It's really, really quite beautifully done. A lot of the things are period items, but things like the wallpaper are period reproductions. But the chairs and things like that nature, I think we found in various antique shops and so on. We tried to be as faithful as we could for the period when Kate lived there. Now you'll notice she did not live in poverty. This is not about poor women. This is about young women who had a lot of get up and go, and went to work in the collar laundry industry and found out that the conditions were really quite harsh, very low pay, scalding hot water and working conditions. And so it didn't take her long, being the outgoing young Irish lass that she was, to say this has to end. We have to improve these conditions. So she went out, and in 1865, she formed the Troy Collar Laundry Union and let him out on strike and actually won the strike, got a 25% increase in pay and much safer working conditions. And so she made quite a mark for herself there as head of that local union. She also became a vice president of the National Labor Union, William Silvies. I think she holds the distinction, I may be wrong, of the first or one of the very first women to serve as a vice president of a national union. So she's quite a remarkable figure. Mostly, as you know better than I do, a lot of the history of women comes from the suffragette movement, legitimately so. And people who are maybe middle class or well-to-do and made their mark in society or philanthropy and other areas. My concern coming out of the labor movement is I thought there had to be some heroes there that we can really elevate the treatment of women who made a contribution in a very different way. And this way is through organizing and improving the lives of her fellow workers. And so she was successful in organizing this union. I would argue today that the president of the AFL-CIO and the American Federation of Teachers and the New York State teachers are all women, stand on Kate Mullaney's shoulders. Women today play a very prominent role throughout the history of the labor movement and have been key throughout the years. So we were able to, I actually served on the National Park Service Board for, I think, 3 or 4 years, which was a great experience. So that gave me some insights into how do we get recognition of this property. Well, I didn't think it was going to make national park level, although I will never give up. Yeah, there's a site there. You can go to Kate Mullaney NHS for nationalstrikesite.org. And so we were able to get it designated first a National Historic Landmark. And that was done through the Park Service. And that took, I don't know, a year or two maybe. The argument being, again, that it's the people like Kate Mullaney who deserve the recognition as well as the other more prominent and famous women in the country. And then I wanted a little more status for it. So I went to our congresspeople and they introduced legislation into the Congress to make it a National Historic Site. My hope was that it would be actually become a unit of the National Park Service. They would pick it up and run with it and pay for the restoration and pay for the management. Well, that didn't quite happen. We did get the National Historic Site status. They said, it's your baby, you own it, you would restore it, and you manage it. So that's how we got to be where we are. The history of the restoration, coming out of the labor movement, I got some public funds, but not much. So I would hold an annual fundraiser honoring prominent people, frequently prominent women trade union members, have a big dinner, honor and a ceremony where we would honor people and give them a Kate Mullaney medal, and they'd take ads out in our journal. So we would raise, I don't know, anywhere $15,000, $20,000 to operate, and that allowed us the money to do it. The picture you see there is the house on the right before in the backyard of the Mullaney house. It's if you're at all in Troy is on the you go across the canal and you go into the river rather and into Troy and up a hill, and it's a very prominent corner there. And so this is a very common housing there. So these are homes that people live in the backyard. So what you see there is the backyard before we started any of the restoration. Now, the restoration of the inside of the house was done by an architect by the name of Jack Waite, who does a lot of historical restoration for the National Park Service. He had to be a local guy and a good friend. So we commissioned him to do the study to define what the apartment would look like. The first floor is the exhibit, second floor, the offices of the Labor Studies Center, and the third floor, Kate Mullaney's apartment as it existed when she lived there. And he did a wonderful job identifying it. Then we bought some stuff and found some stuff, got some gifts and so on to actually furnish it. We then hired a historic landscaper. Yeah, a historic landscaper who came in and said, okay, what did the landscaping look like when Kate Mullaney lived there? And so they came up with a plan for that. You can see the operating engineers coming in and doing the clearing. By the way, a little plug for the building trades here. The house was entirely painted by the Painters Union, the restoration by the Carpenters Union, the electrical work by the Electrical Union, and these were the operating engineers and other union people who did the work on the inside. So how much more it would have cost and whether we could have afforded it without being actually the #2 guy in the labor movement in New York was a big asset at that point. They've done a wonderful job. So as of now, it's totally restored. The yard is beautiful. The house, that's a picture there of her apartment, which is on the third floor. There are 3 small bedrooms and a kitchen, and this is the living area there. One of the bedrooms is in that back corner there, and the carpeting and stuff like that might not have from the period, but the architect tells me that's something you would have found then. Certainly the chair and the table and things of that nature. So we were able to get that restored, and we're open to the public now by appointment. What I try to do is get groups to come through, and we get women's groups and local history groups and scouts and school groups and so on to come through, which is really the better way to do it. Right now, somebody goes on the website and I get a phone call or email say, "Can we come?" One of the frustrations, one of the advantages, of course, is if you're a National Historic site, you get a stamp and you get that designation. I got to say, it's a mixed value because many of the people who come say, "Are you open? Can come through?" And yeah, and do you have the stamp? In other words, they want to get their book filled with the stamp,
Right.
which is fine because once I get them there, they have to listen to my whole half hour, 45-minute tirade about Kate Mullaney and the role that women play in the American labor movement. So I think it's a trade-off. So what we did was we created the website, and all of your viewers, I would hope, get a chance. We showed the date there. Go through the website, and it gives the whole history of Kate Mullaney. Yeah, there you go, and our work, our work on the house. There's some great stories and great background work on Kate. One of the more interesting things we did, I think you should all take the time to see it if you can. We commissioned a play, a musical about Kate Mullaney, and I worked with a very talented director, a woman who came up with the idea. The title is "Don't Iron While the Strike is Hot," and so we did that in two venues in Troy area, and I think we were smart enough to tape it. So you can go on either of those sites, and you will see in one of them, in the Kate Mullaney site, 7 or 8 women with their arms crossed together, which is a scene from the musical where they had just won the strike. And you can watch the musical. It's really a lot of fun and very well done. And there's links to it on both of the sites. On the lesson, on the all this stuff, my goal here again is coming back to my teacher role, and that is that we want to tell stories that normally aren't told. And so here is a perfect story of not only for young women in schools, but men and everybody else, because mostly they hear obviously about, some might heard of Mother Jones and maybe a few of the others, but very little about prominent women who would be considered, I guess, working or middle class. So that was a void. So we thought, well, here's a wonderful opportunity to tell the story of this courageous young Irish immigrant who did all these wonderful things to advance the quality of life for other women, and did so in a quite prominent way very early on. I mean, this is the 1860s, so even men, of course, had difficulty organizing then, let alone, a woman organizing these collar laundry workers. It's really quite an amazing success story. That gave the way to really the growth of women's involvement in the labor movement. Now, in two ways. In many cases, they became members of other unions. Some, like the lady garment workers, had maybe a disproportionate number of women in it, but also they became involved in a lot of other unions. Certainly in my union, where both my local, state, and national president and the head of the AFL-CIO today are all women. So I think there's a story here, and I think your site works hard at that we want to tell the story of everybody, of important women, certainly, but we want to make sure that the story of the Kate Mullaney's of the world get told. And so that's why we restored the place, and that's why we have the website. I do presentations to various groups, but mostly the work is done through people visiting the website. So my commercial of all of this is just to make sure that, by the way, the PowerPoint is on the website too. which has got a lot of information. You can capture stuff there. But really promise yourself you'll see if you can't watch the film Don't Iron While the Strike is Hot. I think that's a quick and dirty overview, so let me stop there and see what else you would like to know or hear.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. You know what? We have a question that I think is really aimed, well, we'll save all the questions till after both presentations, I think. We've got
Okay.
one question about women of color in the labor movement. So you can think about that, Paul, while Evelyn's talking. And Evelyn, I'll let you share your screen and take it away.
And
Slideshow.
slideshow, it's covering up, let's see.
Yeah, it's across the top in the
Yeah,
office.
it is covered up.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can find it. I just guessed. Oh, no, I guessed wrong.
I'm so glad I'm not the only person with this challenge.
We'll go to slideshow maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
you're
covered. So while I'm waiting,
covered by the strip of
while I'm waiting for to uncover at
You
any rate.
can move that top bar to the
Yes.
bottom by dragging it.
Yeah. All right, let's see. I got it. Thank you. I learned something new.
Yeah, click on slideshow, see what happens.
I got it.
Way from beginning. Yeah.
Yeah.
From the beginning, way over on the left, far left side. There you go.
Thank you. I was trying to do two things at once. So you know my name, I'm Evelyn Hershey, and the slide presentation that I have, you'll see the title is the 1913 Paterson Silk Strike, which is integral to the site. And when I was listening to Paul, there are a lot of similarities between the American Labor Museum and his wonderful institution, in that the headquarters of the museum is a national landmark building. The Botto House National Landmark is our home, and it was restored by union labor. The museum is a private nonprofit membership organization, and our members are by and large labor union locals, internationals, individuals. Our board of trustees is composed of labor union officials. And the home, the Botto House National Landmark, was originally the residence of immigrant silk mill workers. Pietro and Maria Botto offered their home as a meeting place for their fellow strikers during the 1913 Paterson Silk Strike. Upton Sinclair, Elizabeth Gurley Flynn, and other champions of labor spoke from the second floor balcony of the Botto family's home to workers of many nationalities. And this action and others like it brought about reforms in the workplace that are broadly enjoyed by Americans today. The role of the house in the strike also brought it national landmark designation in 1983, which is the year that the museum opened to the public, and Botto family member and granddaughter Bunny Kukin moved across the street but continued to be very involved with the museum. Our mission is to advance public understanding of the history of work, workers, and the labor movement throughout the world, with special attention to the ethnicity and immigrant experience of American workers. During the 1913 Paterson Silk Strike, and the images I'll share with you are from a first floor exhibit about the strike and the house's role in the strike. But during this strike, about half of the strikers were women, and a quarter of the strikers who were arrested during the strike were women. Throughout the strike, women played a non-traditional role. The official local leadership of the broad silk weavers, ribbon weavers, and dyers helpers unions were men, but during the strike, an informal group of rank and file leaders emerged, many of whom were women. Thousands of women played an active role on the picket line, in the relief system, in shop meetings, women's meetings, and mass meetings, and in the Paterson pageant, which raised funds for the relief effort. So these women drew strength from their numbers and encouragement from the Industrial Workers of the World Union, which was committed to the active involvement of all workers of all genders, whether foreign born or native, unskilled or skilled. So I'd like to run through these images for you because I think they help describe what you'll see when you come to the museum and tell the story of this strike. The second floor of the museum features changing exhibits. We have 3 exhibits a year, but on the first floor you will see this story, and we tell the story of the 1913 silk strike and the women of the strike in conjunction with the Paterson Museum, which is 10 minutes from us, located in a former locomotive erecting shop, and the Great Falls National Historical Park, part of the National Park System, and under restoration, a mill owner's home called Lambert Castle, which is the headquarters of the Passaic County Historical Society, a robber baron's home, which the county, as I said, is restoring and is expected to open fairly soon. I don't have a date for that. So the city of Paterson is one of the oldest, and we say the oldest planned, keyword planned, industrial city, where locomotives were built, where jute rope was created for shipping, and then where silk arrived as a major product in the 19th century. We have a lot of visitors thanks to the Broadway show Hamilton. Hamilton's statue stands above the Great Falls of the Passaic River, which drop 77 feet. So it's quite a power source, that river, and transportation for the mills. When the silk mills came to Paterson, there were nearly 300 in number by 1910. On the left-hand side, you see dry, what's called raceways. And I believe there is some talk of the possibility of restoring at least part of some of these raceways, this raceway system that powered factories. So we'll see what happens in the future. I hope so. Silk was first produced in Paterson thanks to protective tariffs of the federal government in the 1840s. All the raw silk was imported. The factory work was done by 8-year-olds up to 50-year-olds. Many didn't survive beyond that age to work in the mills. You see a woman on the right-hand side working at a loom. The manufacturers found they could not produce silk without skilled and unskilled workers from Europe. So they would recruit them at Ellis Island. And it was often advantageous for them to recruit a mixed group of workers who couldn't communicate and organize in their workplaces. So their workforce was primarily foreign born, and Paterson produced half of the silk that was consumed in the United States by 1900 and acquired the title the Silk City. High quality broad silk, ribbons for hats, all types of silk for upholstery. Mr. Lambert of Lambert Castle, whom I mentioned, was an immigrant and a part owner of one of the larger companies in the city. His home which, as I mentioned, we partner with Lambert Castle on school field trips. You can visit a mill owner's home and a worker's home, the Botto House, to compare the lifestyles of the workers. So this is an exterior and interior view of Mr. Lambert's home. I always like to see these numbers of the residents and the population of the city and how important these foreign-born workers were to keep the mills going. And these were not immigrants from fields. These were immigrants from harsh industrial settings who often came from silk centers in Europe, Macclesfield, England, Biella, Italy, where the Bottos hailed from, Lyon, France, Krefeld, Germany. Inside of the mills, the working conditions were very unhygienic and hazardous. Dye shop workers faced the most hazardous work, working with chemicals. They were required to taste in order to determine that the chemical combination was correct. Italian dye house workers, and Italian workers in particular, had a reputation for being political radicals, and so did some of the Eastern Europeans. Weavers were considered skilled workers. In the Botto home, Pietro was a skilled weaver, earning about $15 a week for a 55-hour work week. His daughters learned the skill, his 4 daughters, by going to work with him. And you could see 2 weavers on the left, a gentleman working a ribbon loom, the woman in the center operating a jacquard loom, producing pattern silk, and the teen on the right-hand side filling bobbins, a bobbin girl. The workday, 10 hours standard. Sometimes it could be longer, with a half a day on Saturday, a 55-hour work week. Compared to other industries, wages in the silk mills were low. The silk mill workers often used strikes to determine their working conditions. They were a militant workforce. The time to go on strike was in the spring. Well, actually, a little bit before the spring, wintertime before the spring selling season. So there were a lot of strikes in Paterson. Strikes were very, very common. Immigrant workers came with traditions of commitment to the working class and a willingness to confront management. We see a street in Paterson with a parade of silk workers in 1913. And on the picket sign that is visible in the center, it reads, "We are on strike for bread and butter." In particular, the 1913 strike began over a change in technology. Mill owner Henry Doherty purchased new looms and increased loom assignment without increasing wages. So it meant unemployment for half of his workforce. And that caused the initial walkout, which spread to the nearly 300 other mills in the city. And the strike lasted 6 months for some workers. We see 2 immigrant weavers at their looms here. The strike became a general strike due to other grievances, some that we've talked about. Child labor we didn't mention, but that was an issue as well. So the workers were determined this time, despite their differences. They were families from 9 European countries, and their differences had been used against them in other strikes and other labor actions. So they refused to be divided and determined actually that their main demand would be for an 8-hour workday. Those Lawrence, Massachusetts workers a year before in 1912 in the Bread and Roses strike had won an 8-hour day with the help of the IWW. So Paterson followed suit And these workers settled in and organized themselves for a serious strike for an 8-hour workday with mass meetings and shop meetings, picket line duty, and a relief effort set up to support the workers. First clash with police a month after the strike began in January of 1913, at the end of January. By the end of February, the police were out in force, arresting workers, trying to end the strike with the strong arm of the police. The mill owners hired armed and with billy clubs agents from the O'Brien office in Newark, who were here in this image escorting scabs or replacement workers to a dye shop. But in doing so, they would fire pistols, and 2 workers lost their lives as a result. Shortly after the strike began, Elizabeth Gurley Flynn and fellow organizers from the Industrial Workers of the World, or the Wobblies, came to Paterson to assist the workers. And you see actually a postcard image here that is reproduced in our exhibit and is part of the collection of the museum. Another postcard on the left in our collection. Elizabeth Gurley Flynn speaking at a rally in Paterson. Big Bill Haywood and Carlo Tresca at the top right, walking with workers. In the center below, Hubert Henry Harrison, a self-taught Afro-Caribbean, at that time, socialist, campaigning for Socialist Party candidates around the country, who spoke once in the city to the workers and once from the Botto House balcony. And you see John Reed, the journalist, who also wrote and assisted the workers during the strike at the lower right. Haledon became a haven for free speech and assembly for the strikers. Haledon, a streetcar suburb of Paterson where many Northern Italian immigrants made their home, including the Botto family. And those working people elected a socialist mayor, William Brookman, who defended the rights of the striking silk workers to meet freely and hold their rallies. So he was a hero to the strikers. And because of him, the workers came up the hill from Paterson and could assemble before the Botto family's home. Their balcony above the main entrance of their house served as a speaker's platform every Sunday from March through the end of July. And it was here where the workers made decisions. It was here where they shared news of any progress of negotiations. And the meetings were used as a sort of pep rally. Workers would sing from the balcony, add new lyrics to a familiar tune to cheer on Elizabeth Gurley Flynn and their union fight. To continue their strike, workers and the IWW assisted in finding sympathetic families who fed and housed children of the strikers so that parents could continue picket line duty. In order to continue the strike on June 7th, workers reenacted the events of their strike on the stage of Madison Square Garden. On the left, a painted backdrop before which workers are reenacting an event of their strike. And on the right, a program of the pageant reproduced here, but in our museum collection. In the end, the workers began to feel that they should fold their strike and fight another day. So by July, most of the workers had returned to the mills. The mill owners felt chastened enough by loss of income that the 4-loom system was abandoned and the weavers went back to operating 2 looms. Otherwise, the conditions in the mill remained the same. The 8-hour day, their main demand, was not won until 1919. The strike did lay the groundwork for legislation. Indeed, lawmakers began to hold hearings, and workers testified about the working conditions in the mills. So they laid the groundwork in 1913 for the benefits that we all enjoy today, and themselves learned a lot about solidarity. And some who were involved in the 13 strike, some women went on to become leaders in labor union locals. I think of Dyer's Local 1733 of Paterson, and an officer, a woman officer of that union of Italian descent, actually went on to run for a state legislature in the 1940s. So their union work, their shop work led to service in the political arena as well. You see the Botto House as it appears today. You are welcome to visit. This is our main entrance. We have wonderful street parking, but no parking lot, which is fine, and beautiful gardens, old world gardens, and exhibits inside. Pietro and Maria Botto appear on the screen here. They lived in the house their entire lives. He passed away in 1945. She died at the age of 45 in 1915, and they found their home to be a piece of the American dream that they had hoped for when they first arrived at Ellis Island in 1892 as a 28-year-old young father and a 22-year-old mother of a 2.5-year-old baby girl who is grown up in this slide and appearing on the far right. Albina, where is she? Oh, I'm sorry. On the left-hand side, the second bride from the left, Albina, their oldest daughter, was an immigrant with them. And Albina's other sisters that you see were born here in New Jersey. All silk workers, all living when the museum opened. Ava, on the left, told us she was blacklisted after the 1913 strike and had to change her name in order to secure a job in the mills. So you're welcome to visit us. We're open year-round, Wednesday through Saturday, from 1 to 4 p.m. and by appointment. The exterior of the house you see on the right are restored kitchen. There's a restored dining room, bedroom, and parlor, and old world gardens. And on the second floor, you see on the lower right-hand side a view of a recent exhibit that was on display celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Hospital Professionals and Allied Employees Union of New Jersey. Its recently retired president, Ann Toomey, is a trustee of the museum. So changing exhibit space on our second floor. Field trip groups and adult groups are welcome to visit virtually as well as in person, and to enjoy a game of bocce before leaving. We hope also a visit to the Great Falls and the Mill District in Paterson as well. So I hope I haven't gone over time. I will look forward to any questions or comments and hope you'll come and visit sometime.
Thanks very much. That was great, both of you. Yay. We have 2 questions to start off. Sabrina asks, do either of you have knowledge about women of color being involved in the unions?
So I can answer that. We have had on our second floor opportunities for changing exhibits related to women and women of color, Latina women in the workforce and in labor unions. And we have portable exhibits that may be borrowed. We call them museums in a suitcase, and one focuses on the civil rights movement and A. Philip Randolph, a man, A. Philip Randolph, and the Pullman Porters, and also included is Paul Robeson, New Jersey's Paul Robeson. So both of those gentlemen had very influential, I should say. Of course, they're important spouses, but influential spouses. So there is focus in that portable exhibit on those two women in Randolph and Robeson's life. And there is, in the 1913 silk strike, very little evidence that there were African Americans working in the silk mills, but Hubert Henry Harrison was a very important speaker during the strike. Obviously a gentleman. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Paul, do you have any knowledge of African American women being a part of the collar workers union?
No, it was predominantly Irish.
Mhm.
There were very few of even other
Yeah.
the folks there. It was a very large Irish community. There might be a few, not many. Certainly not any of color at that point in time. At that, today it's a very different story, of course.
Right. Yeah.
We've done some oral history interviews of contemporary labor union members, including African American women, that are on our YouTube channel. We have a program called Wednesdays with Workers. And so we've interviewed a number of, as I said, contemporary workers, including women of color. So if you're interested, you're welcome to check out our YouTube channel. Mm-hmm.
What did they search for on YouTube?
It's
Botto House?
Labor Museum.
Labor Museum, the Botto House. Okay. Another question that, and this is particularly for Evelyn, did either of the world wars impact the silk industry and those mills in Paterson?
Well, World War I helped the workers because the war produced full employment. Wars are good at, you need product and it employs people. So
Right.
because there was full employment, that's how the workers were able to get the 8-hour day in 1919. They had more of a voice and more conducive to achieving their demands. So it helped them. World War II, I'm not so sure. The silk industry in Paterson was leaving even in 1913. One of the reasons the strike dragged on for so long was because many of the larger silk producers had already opened annexes in coal mining regions of Pennsylvania, near Scranton and Allentown, and they employed the women and children of coal miners who they thought they were more docile workers. And those mills wouldn't strike in sympathy with the Paterson mills. So it was some factory flight already. And then by the 30s, there is introduction of synthetic fibers. So it started to change the industry here in Paterson. Yeah. Slower decline and factory flight south and then overseas and changes in technology. Yeah.
Right. Here's a question for both of you, really. Either one can take it in whatever order. But when you were applying for the National Historic Landmark status for your sites, did you find that the emphasis on working class and labor, was that challenging as an asset, or was it an asset?
Well, it didn't appear to be a problem. I tried to go through the merits, but both on a little bit on the landmarking and on the National Historic Site, I made sure that our congressional delegation and our state senators knew about it, and especially one or two that sat on the Interior Committee that oversaw the Park Service. So those were helpful. But I think the case we made is that those people who were working class and made important contributions deserve the same recognition. And I think that was finally realized by everybody involved, including the Park Service.
Mm-hmm.
You know what helped too? Around the same, I wasn't involved in that process. I came to the museum in 1988, but what helped was that there was scholarship by people like Howard Zinn, Zinn, Howard Zinn, who was writing A People's History of the United States. So there was more interest on the part of academics in telling history through the stories of working people, as opposed to corporate magnates and generals and kings and queens, but the collective contributions of working people. So Howard Zinn and others were at the forefront of that. And so our applications went through at that time. And I think that helped.
Right. And wasn't the Park Service doing a labor theme study at some point that may have been helpful as well? They were looking to create more sites that told a labor story, I believe, but very interesting. And I know that Kate Mullaney had no children, but do the Bottos have descendants who you see?
Yes, there are descendants, of course, like most families all over the country, Ohio, Florida, but there is a great niece who lives in our county. And as I said, the granddaughter lived in the house until 1983 and moved right across the street and was very involved. She passed away in 2022, but she does have descendants in the area and family in Italy too that keep in touch with the family that is here. So that's very valuable in terms of, it was very valuable in terms of setting up the period rooms with furnishings. So we have a lot of the Botto family household items as a result.
Yeah, the ones that actually
Yeah,
the family. Oh, that's great.
yeah, it is.
They
Yeah.
gave them back.
The house was always owned by members of the Botto family. So things like the old flooring in the kitchen were taken up and put in the cellar, but we could put them back, and old sinks and things like that. Yeah.
I might say that we were inspired by the Botto House and Angelica Santamoro, who I became friends with a number of years ago, to say, boy, this is a model. And someone mentioned Kate Mullaney, and so we have a big debt of gratitude to the Botto House for the concept of finding a site that recognizes somebody who really needed to be recognized.
Oh, that's great.
Thank you.
That must feel good to hear that.
And by the way, Ann Toomey is a very close friend of mine. She's a fellow vice president of the AFT, and there's no better people on the earth.
That's great. Well, I want to thank you both. We don't have any other, now's the time, if anyone has questions, put them in the chat quickly, but we are coming up on an hour and I don't want to keep anyone too late tonight. But I want to thank both of you for your presentations. This was really interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was great to be with everyone and to learn about the collaborative too.
Right.
Yeah.
And remember those websites. It's KateMullaneyNHS.org, AmericanLaborStudies.org. Is that right?
Yeah, labor-studies.org.
Labor-studies.org.
And be sure to watch the Kate Mullaney musical. I think you'll love it.
Yeah, iron while the strike is hot, right? All right. Thank you very, very much, Paul and Evelyn. And thanks everyone for attending tonight. This will be on our YouTube channel in the next few weeks. And hopefully other people can catch it then. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for all your great work.
Good night.
Good night.